The encryption key arrived embedded in a digitized photograph of a dead clock, hands frozen precisely at 3:17 a.m. My burner phone, usually silent save for the background hum of proxy servers, shrieked a high-pitched alarm, instantly erasing the entire drive after delivering its payload. The message was stark, relayed through 3 layers of end-to-end PGP and steganography. The Future Forum. They aren't predicting. They are writing. I am April Woods, and my beat is the dark truth lurking just beneath the placid surface of consensus reality. The Future Forum, long whispered about in the most volatile corners of the deep web, was supposedly a mythical space where high-level users posted details of world events exactly 24 hours before they unfolded. Stock crashes, political assassinations, weather anomalies, all cataloged, time-stamped, and proven 100% accurate the next day. The source who sent the key, handle Cassandra_22, had risked everything, and I knew why. This wasn't just insider trading. This was temporal control, and the existence of such a capability was a geopolitical weapon of mass destabilization. I spent the next 30 hours in a sweat-soaked room, dissecting the key, mapping the decentralized network architecture. The forum wasn't hosted on typical darknets. It utilized a quantum-entangled peer-to-peer network designed to render tracing impossible. Using a bespoke kernel exploit I developed 2 years ago and saved for the big one, I finally breached the authentication firewall. The login screen was minimalist. Black text on an iron-gray background, reading only Omnes Futurum Simus. We all know the future. Once inside, the atmosphere was chillingly professional. No memes, no idle chatter. Just meticulously organized subsections, market shifts, public figures, kinetic events, and the ominously titled architectural anomalies. My eyes immediately went to the highest-ranking user, the alleged moderator, the one whose posts dictated global trends and possessed absolute certainty, handle Ouroboros. Ouroboros had just posted a forecast for tomorrow. The Eastern European exchange rate will invert the previous day's gains by precisely 1300 hours Greenwich Mean Time. Simultaneously, the Prime Minister of Moldova will announce an immediate, temporary cessation of all public works projects, citing unforeseen structural deficiencies in the national infrastructure. The level of detail was pathological. I set immediate surveillance, knowing that if this was real, tomorrow would be proof, and if it was proof, I had to find the source before the source found me. The journalistic compulsion was overwhelming, mixed with a sickening sense of dread. I was reading tomorrow's news today, and the implications felt like staring directly into a black hole of causality. Gaining read-only access was the easy part. Staying undetected required every ounce of cyber stealth I possessed. The platform's monitoring system was aggressive, programmed to flag any packet deviation suggesting forensic analysis. I used a custom-built virtual machine operating entirely in volatile memory, routing traffic through 5 non-contiguous satellite links. Over the next 48 hours, the chilling reality of the future forum settled in. Ouroboros' predictions materialized with mechanical precision. The Moldovan PM, right on cue, stopped all construction, citing minor, non-existent structural flaws. The Eastern European market followed the predicted inversion. But it was the architectural anomalies section that truly solidified the dark truth. A user named Seer_99 posted, "Westbound 405, mile marker 87. An empty, yellow school bus will be found completely submerged in the dry retention ditch adjacent to the abandoned dairy farm. Driver's side door ajar. No passengers. Tomorrow, 10:45 a.m. local." The next day, every news outlet ran the bizarre, unexplained story. This wasn't just a forum. It was a script being meticulously followed by the universe itself, or more sinisterly, by agents unknown. I focused solely on Ouroboros. His posts were distinct. Unlike the lower-tier users who reported localized, minor anomalies, Ouroboros dealt in macro shocks, the kind that required massive, almost subliminal coordination. His language was never descriptive, it was prescriptive. The major port contracts in Singapore will shift regulatory oversight to the Panama subsidiary. This is necessary for flow stabilization. It didn't sound like a prediction. It sounded like an instruction that millions of unseen gears in the global machine were primed to obey. I began reverse engineering Ouroboros' posting routine. He always posted between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. Universal Time Coordinated. Crucially, every post was accompanied by a unique, highly compressed header image, abstract, geometric patterns reminiscent of Rorschach tests, but infinitely more complex. I theorized these images weren't decoration. They were carriers of metadata, potentially the only weak link. I deployed a non-invasive spectral analyzer, hunting for the ghost in the machine. I had to know if Ouroboros was a collective intelligence, a highly advanced AI, or a single human being controlling tomorrow. If it was the latter, humanity was already checkmated, playing a game whose rules were written 24 hours in advance by one hidden player. The dread intensified. What if Ouroboros wasn't predicting catastrophe, but merely the optimized path to stability? And what happens when someone tries to interfere with optimization? The metadata analysis confirmed my suspicion. The abstract header images used by Ouroboros were not just visual noise. They contained a subtle, almost undetectable artifact, a repeated pattern of light diffraction consistent with a specific, highly unique industrial laser scanning process. This pattern was consistent across every single image, suggesting the visual input was being captured, processed, and encrypted using the same proprietary hardware, likely located in a physically secure environment. But before I could fully trace the spectral signature, I felt compelled to test the system's limits. I needed to see if the future was truly immutable or merely enforced. I opened a new thread in the kinetic event section using a newly generated one-time alias, April_Fool. My post was deliberately disruptive, a direct contradiction to Ouroboros' latest forecast regarding regional banking mergers. Ouroboros had guaranteed a merger. I posted a detailed, plausible scenario resulting in an immediate regulatory breakup. The moment I hit submit, the air in my isolation room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The entire future forum interface flashed blood red. A system alert, in aggressive, oversized font, filled my screen. Causality violation detected. Immediate timeline correction protocol initiated. The thread I posted vanished instantly. My entire virtual machine environment began to self-destruct, not through typical software error, but through a cascading, targeted energy spike that melted the CPU core within seconds. The forum had not just deleted my post, it had actively attacked my hardware, attempting to trace the physical origin point through the backwash of the destructive surge. I disconnected the melted drive and scrambled the entire network. I had confirmation. The forum actively enforces its posted reality. It's not passive viewing, it's active control. This realization changed everything. I wasn't hunting a predictor. I was hunting a temporal policeman. The physical trace became paramount, and the diffraction pattern was my only lead. I cross-referenced the unique laser signature against proprietary hardware manufacturer databases, focusing on facilities that specialized in deep-time data storage and zero-latency processing. The search results were few, but one stood out, a facility registered as Kronos Data Solutions, located deep in the isolated plains of North Dakota, masquerading as a defunct agricultural research center. The sheer geographical isolation, the aggressive security filings, and the unique hardware signature converged into a single point of chilling certainty. Ouroboros, the writer of tomorrow, was based in a windowless bunker in the middle of America's heartland, dictating the movements of the world through coded images and prescriptive text. My journalistic investigation had suddenly transformed into an existential infiltration. The journey to North Dakota was a study in paranoia. I shed all non-essential electronics, using only a paper map, a hardened satellite phone, and a small, specially shielded computing device designed to survive EMP bursts. The Kronos Data Solutions facility was 40 miles outside the nearest town, accessible only by an unmarked, winding gravel road. It was exactly as described in the property filings, a massive, derelict grain silo complex surrounded by seemingly abandoned farm machinery. Except, the silos were immaculate, and the perimeter fence pulsed with a faint, imperceptible magnetic field that sang in the high register of my RF detector. This wasn't abandoned. It was highly classified. My journalistic cover story was flimsy but necessary, investigating historical agricultural patent fraud. I approached the outer gate. Knowing the moment I crossed the threshold, I was entering a zero-tolerance environment. Two large, silent guards materialized from a concealed outpost, wearing nondescript paramilitary gear. They didn't ask for ID, they analyzed my thermal signature and gait. I handed over my forged credentials. The lead guard, whose eyes held the vacant calm of someone who rarely spoke, simply nodded toward the main structure, a concrete behemoth that housed the supposed research laboratories. Infiltrating required patience. The facility's interior security relied on layered biometrics and a sophisticated network of pressure sensors. I spent the first 12 hours observing the shift changes, mapping the movement patterns of the internal staff, a small group of perhaps 20 individuals, uniformly dressed in sterile gray jumpsuits. They carried themselves with a reverence that suggested they were not just maintenance workers, but acolytes. They were the Chronos Keepers. What struck me most was the complete absence of typical high-volume server infrastructure. No massive cooling units roaring, no telltale power grid demands. The facility's power signature was minimal, suggesting whatever they were running required very little energy. This negated the possibility of a large-scale AI cluster. This reinforced the idea of a singular, specialized mechanism. My target was the central silo, which according to local blueprints, was the seed vault. I bypassed the outer corridor pressure plates using magnetic dampeners and accessed the main floor ventilation shaft. The air inside smelled faintly of ozone and metallic dust. As I crawled through the ductwork, the low-frequency hum of the building intensified, a deep resonance that vibrated through my ribs. I was getting closer to Ouroboros, closer to the source of controlled reality, and the closer I got, the more terrifyingly quiet the rest of the world felt, as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for tomorrow's instructions to be posted. Inside the central concrete structure, the ambient temperature was meticulously regulated at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, dry and sterile. I dropped silently out of the ventilation shaft into a narrow service passage. The keepers operated with unnerving efficiency, moving between consoles with a focused dedication of priests tending a shrine. Their conversations, which I tapped using a directional microphone, were not about data management or networking protocols. They were discussions about stability thresholds, dream synchronicity, and prevention of chaotic feedback. They were filtering reality. I intercepted a digital communication packet, weakly encrypted, detailing the system's operation. The facility did not house servers, but a single, colossal computing unit nicknamed the Oracle, built almost a century ago by a forgotten consortium dedicated to predictive modeling. The Keepers believed humanity could not handle true free will, that the temporal field was inherently unstable, and that the Oracle, by broadcasting highly controlled, deterministic events, prevented total societal collapse, a controlled burn scenario implemented daily. They were not malicious. They were preservationists, convinced they were saving the species by micromanaging its destiny. The revelation that the Keepers were merely intermediaries, disseminating the future rather than creating it, heightened the mystery of Ouroboros. If the Keepers were running the Oracle, who was running the Keepers? Or, more precisely, who was the Oracle listening to? The core chamber, the seed vault, was behind a 3-foot-thick lead door, sealed by a rotating combination of biometric scans and a cryptographic sequence that changed every 4 hours. I watched a shift change, timing the transition. The lead keeper, designated Custodian Gamma, entered the code. As the door began its agonizingly slow rotation, I deployed a high-frequency acoustic scrambler, temporarily blinding the internal microphones and camera array for a 6-second window. 6 seconds was all I needed. I slipped past the threshold just as the custodian entered, disappearing into the shadows of the immense chamber. The sheer scale of the equipment inside was overwhelming. It wasn't a computer room, it was a cathedral built around a machine. In the center stood the Oracle, not a sleek modern server rack, but a vast, bronze, semi-organic machine pulsating with a soft, internal blue light. But my attention was immediately drawn to the source of the data, the true Ouroboros. It was not an AI, not a collective. It was a human being. The sight of the true Ouroboros froze me in place. Suspended within the heart of the bronze oracle machine, partially submerged in a transparent fluid bath and connected by hundreds of fibrous cables, was a human being. He was ancient, frail, and utterly unconscious, kept alive and perpetually dreaming by the life support systems of the machine. The sheer cruelty of the sight, the ultimate sacrifice of individual autonomy for manufactured stability, hit me with the force of a physical blow. The cables were woven into his scalp, his spine, and his optic nerves, clearly designed to extract raw neural data and filter it through the Oracle's processing unit, converting the volatile chaos of human dreams into the deterministic text and coded images posted on the Future Forum. This was Ouroboros, not a hacker or a god, but a conduit, a prisoner whose dreams were the world's instructions. I realized the keepers weren't receiving the future from the machine. The machine was merely translating the raw temporal data captured from this sleeping man's mind. The keepers were right. If he stopped, the timeline would likely shatter, but not because a computer would fail, because the only stabilizing anchor, the human dream of tomorrow, would cease. I moved closer, avoiding the patrol routes of the keepers. I needed to understand his suffering, his consciousness, or lack thereof. The man's face was etched with decades of controlled slumber, but occasionally, his brow would furrow, a flicker of rapid eye movement beneath his lids. A small, high-definition display panel adjacent to the man's head cycled through the unfiltered neural activity, translating the volatile inputs into abstract symbols before the Oracle streamlined them into prescriptive English. The symbols flashing across the screen were horrifying. Images of fire, collapsing bridges, fragmented faces screaming silently. The keepers were actively censoring the darkest parts of Ouroboros' dreamscape, only allowing the necessary stabilizing instructions to pass through, creating a future that was functional but sterile, dark but not catastrophic. I accessed a small, unsecured diagnostic terminal embedded in the side of the Oracle. The terminal displayed a countdown timer, 3 hours, 42 minutes, and 11 seconds. This was the interval until the next global prediction, Ouroboros' next scheduled post. My journalistic mission shifted from exposing a conspiracy to saving a victim. But freeing him meant unleashing the raw and censored future, the chaos the keepers were so desperately trying to hold back. The diagnostic terminal offered a terrifying window into Ouroboros' mind. His brain activity was entering a deep REM state, the point at which the most complex temporal data was extracted. I watched the unfiltered feed, realizing that the old man's dreams were intensely focused on a single, imminent event. The abstract symbols coalesced into a consistent pattern I recognized from previous analyses of large-scale infrastructure failures. The sleep command. The sleep command was the hypothetical, catastrophic scenario the keepers sometimes worried about, a deep, low-frequency dream pattern capable of instantly overloading the world's primary digital infrastructure, causing a complete global system reset. It was too vast to be filtered. It was too fundamental. Ouroboros was dreaming the end of civilization as they knew it, a sudden digital silence across the globe. The keepers, engrossed in their monitoring stations 50 yards away, hadn't yet noticed the critical spike in the REM resonance. They were busy maintaining the current reality, oblivious to the fact that their anchor was about to dream the end of the line. The countdown timer ticked down inexorably, 1 hour, 28 minutes, and 9 seconds. I had less than 90 minutes to act. I analyzed the neural interface connections. They were complex, integrated with the machine's cooling and life support, making a clean, immediate disconnect impossible without killing the patient instantly. The keepers had built the system to be irreversible. If Ouroboros died, the resulting neurological shockwave alone could trigger a feedback loop that would cause the system failure he was dreaming. I had to sever the temporal link without immediately terminating the biointerface. I needed a surgical, instantaneous rupture of the connection to the processing unit, while simultaneously triggering a system overload that would mask my escape and prevent immediate reconnection. This wasn't reporting anymore. This was sabotage on a global scale. I began routing a localized, high-amplitude electromagnetic pulse through the system's auxiliary power conduits, designed to surge directly into the logic board controlling the neural signal translation, effectively frying the middleman. It was a desperate move, risking not only my life but the stability of the entire timeline. I knew the moment I pulled the trigger, the future, which had been so orderly and predictable, would revert to absolute, horrifying chance. The preparation for the surgical shockwave required absolute silence and focus speed. I utilized a high-density lithium cell battery, stripped from one of my shielded devices, and rigged it to a specialized conductive alloy stylus I carried for deep web physical hacking. The goal is to manually bridge two critical power components leading into the Oracle's neural translation board, bypassing the Keeper's internal fail-safe architecture. I worked in the low, ominous glow of the bronze machine, the heavy hum of the suspended life support my only companion. The closest Keeper, Custodian Gamma, was 5 minutes into a standardized security sweep rotation. I had 45 seconds to make the connection and evacuate before the resulting surge triggered every alarm in the facility. The digital clock above Ouroboros's had showed 3 minutes and 17 seconds until the next temporal broadcast. The sleep command dream was intensifying, the neural patterns spiking wildly. I placed the stylus carefully against the first component, feeling the immediate static discharge against my skin. The air crackled with contained energy. I moved to the second point, heart hammering against my ribs. As the metal made contact, a violent, blinding blue-white arc erupted, followed by the terrifying sound of rapidly melting circuits. The Oracle shrieked, not a mechanical noise, but a synthesized cry of agonizing system failure. The lights flickered, plunged into darkness, and then returned, flashing cyclically. The suspension fluid around Ouroboros violently churned, and the connected cables snapped, retracting from his body with audible pops. The man was free of the machine, still breathing, but drifting toward absolute wakefulness for the first time in decades. The immediate silence from the severed connection was deafening. The countdown clock froze, displaying the exact moment of failure, 3 minutes and 15 seconds. The Chronos Keepers reacted instantly. Alarms blared, and red emergency lights spun throughout the complex. Custodian Gamma shouted into his radio. Neural link severed. Contain the vault. It's gone chaotic. I seized the opportunity, shoving the melted stylus and the stripped battery deep into the remaining open cavity of the translation board, ensuring total, unrecoverable structural damage. As Keepers converged on the vault entrance, I retrieved the logs, a massive, encrypted data dump detailing every filtered dream, every instruction, and the full identities of Ouroboros and the Chronos Keepers. It was the complete record of the world's quiet servitude. I vaulted over a console and sprinted toward the narrow service passage, leaving the chaotic hum of the collapsing Oracle behind me. I had chosen chaos, chosen freedom, and now I had to run with the terrifying, unknowable consequences. Escaping the Chronos Data Solutions facility was a desperate race against a highly trained paramilitary group focused on absolute recovery. The moment the neural link was severed, the entire complex went into hardened lockdown. Blast doors slammed shut, and automated defense systems mobilized. Using the facility blueprints memorized during my infiltration, I navigated the secondary conduits beneath the main floor, avoiding the heavy boots and frantic shouts of the Keepers. I knew they wouldn't prioritize chasing me. Their absolute focus would be on stabilizing the power surge and, perhaps, attempting to re-establish a link, a futile effort, given the total destruction of the translation board. My primary objective shifted to extracting the data logs and securing my exfiltration point. I reached the surface through an emergency maintenance hatch 50 yards from the perimeter fence, emerging into the cold, pre-dawn air of North Dakota. The sky was still the deep, bruised color of night, but I felt an unnatural sense of temporal urgency, as if the clock was accelerating. I drove my rented, unassuming vehicle hard across the gravel road, constantly scanning the rearview mirror for pursuit. 2 miles out, I pulled into a prearranged dead zone, activated my hardened satellite link, and initiated the upload of the Ouroboros logs. The transfer was agonizingly slow, a gigabyte of world-controlling data transferring across encrypted channels while the newly freed future waited, unseen and ready to crash. While the data moved, I listened to the radio bands. Initial reports were chaotic and fragmented. Power fluctuations in major global cities, inexplicable network crashes affecting financial markets, and reports of widespread, minor temporal disorientation among the general populace. The world wasn't instantly destroyed. It was vibrating, shaking off the decades of enforced stability. The system reset Ouroboros had dreamed had partially occurred, not through his will, but through the violent termination of his function. The future forum, I later confirmed, vanished entirely, leaving behind a blank, encrypted error page, the ultimate dead end. I secured the logs, destroying the satellite phone, and melted back into the flow of civilian traffic, heading east. I had the scoop of a lifetime, the key to explaining the world's sudden, terrifying instability, but the ethical weight of choosing chaos over controlled slavery pressed down on me. I had saved one man, Ouroboros, but unleashed the unpredictable future upon 7 billion. The journalist in me knew the story had to be told. The human in me dreaded the headlines I was about to write. 3 weeks passed before I dared to resurface, operating under 3 layers of digital camouflage, moving between safe houses. The world was still reeling. Financial analysts were baffled by the market's irrational volatility. Geopolitical commentators were struggling to explain sudden, contradictory policy shifts. The uniformity and predictability of the previous decades had evaporated, replaced by genuine, messy, human free will and accompanying instability. I spent those weeks meticulously analyzing the Ouroboros logs. The data confirmed everything. The Chronos Keepers were a transnational consortium dating back to the late 1940s, dedicated to preventative temporal management. They had discovered the unique predictive capabilities of the man, whose actual name was Elias Thorne, and had chosen to preserve the timeline, believing Elias's unconscious dreams were the only thing preventing global entropy. The logs were a journalistic goldmine. Names, dates, specific instructions Ouroboros had been forced to dream into existence, including the planned destruction of several political figures and the careful manipulation of specific environmental crises to maintain the stability threshold. I wrote the story not as an expose of a powerful secret society, but as a chilling account of a crime against consciousness and causality. The headline I settled on was stark: "The Man Who Dreamed Tomorrow: How a Secret Syndicate Imprisoned One Man to Control the World's Future, and Why His Freedom Means Absolute Chaos." I released the story simultaneously across 5 independent journalistic platforms, along with the irrefutable, time-stamped logs. The immediate reaction was a global cataclysm of disbelief, panic, and confirmation. The Chronos Keepers attempted to discredit the data, but the sheer volume and specificity of the logs, detailing future events that had already occurred, rendered their denial useless. My life was now permanently etched in shadow. The Keepers would never forgive the exposure, and the world was angry at the removal of their comfortable, predictable leash. I looked at the news reports filtering through my secure terminal. A major geopolitical dispute that Ouroboros had previously prevented flared violently. A stock market prediction that should have stabilized a volatile market went spectacularly wrong, leading to a deep, prolonged recession. The chaos was the new normal. But Elias Thorne, Ouroboros, was reportedly awake and receiving medical care in an undisclosed location, his brain healing from the trauma of decades of forced temporal servitude. I had chosen the darker, more uncertain path, the path of truth, and in the unpredictable, unsettling flicker of the new future, I felt the grim satisfaction of a journalist who had not just reported the story, but violently ripped the curtain from the stage where the world had been performing its scripted reality. The publication of the Ouroboros logs fractured global consensus. Governments collapsed under the weight of revealed manipulation. Financial systems fought against the newly introduced stochastic randomness. The Keepers, or what was left of the organization, retreated deeper underground, issuing threats and attempting counter-narratives that drowned in the flood of factual evidence I had provided. My existence was reduced to a sequence of secure, temporary locations and perpetually encrypted communications. I knew I had committed to a life on the run, a constant shadow, but the magnitude of the truth was worth the cost. I maintained contact with Cassandra_22, the original source, who confirmed she was one of the lower-tier keepers who had cracked under the ethical strain of maintaining Elias Thorne's suffering. She confirmed that Elias was slowly recovering, his mind finally processing the present instead of perpetually projecting the next 24 hours. The world was experiencing a withdrawal from deterministic reality, a chaotic detoxification process. The unpredictable future was terrifying, leading to micro-catastrophes daily, but it was real dash. My final piece for the current cycle focused on the psychological impact of the temporal liberation. I argued that humanity must learn to live without the security blanket of the predetermined future, that free will demanded accountability and the acceptance of risk. The dark irony was not lost on me. The keepers, believing they were saving humanity from itself, had merely postponed the inevitable reckoning with true chance. I looked at the latest raw satellite feed, a spontaneous, massive blackout in Southeast Asia, an event utterly outside the bounds of predictability, entirely unscripted. It was terrifying, messy, and undeniable proof that the thread of temporal control was broken. The old era of the Future Forum was over. The future was now dark, unknown, and entirely ours to write, one terrifying, uncertain second at a time. My role as the dark chronicler of chaos had just begun, and the silence from the now empty plains of North Dakota was the loudest story I would ever hear.